funny, listeners? In business school, they teach you how to forecast markets, manage teams, and build strategy decks that look flawless on paper. But the real world, it is unpredictable. It's people driven, not PowerPoint driven. Most of what we think we know about success starts to crumble the moment when it meets reality. Today, on this episode of the BizBlend Podcast, I'm your host, and as always, we are going to dive into that very gap, the space between what's taught and what's true. My guest, Mike Chaput, knows that space very well. He bought his first company at just 24 with borrowed money and zero experience. And it tanked. Bankruptcy, humility, a crash course in what they don't teach you at Berkeley or maybe Columbia. But from the failure came fire and the creation of Insight, a $35 million company built on systems, culture, and purpose. And today, Mike helps people lead people turn into leaders, turn big ideas into tangible results that actually work in the boardroom, not just in theory. So let's talk about bridging that gap, theory versus reality, and how leaders can stop chasing perfection and start building progress. So, Mike, welcome to the show, and it is really an honor to have you here with us.
Well, thanks. That introduction was quite poetic. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be on, and thanks to your audience for their time and attention in advance.
Of course, of course. Mike, we're gonna start with the failure part, especially when strategy fails. You have said before that most strategies fail because they're not bad, but because they're not built for execution. I'm really, really curious to know, like, what do you think goes wrong when any brilliant, plan on paper, it falls apart in the real world?
Yeah, well, a great question and topic point. So maybe I'll say it this way. I believe that business strategy and culture need to be a perfect blend. They need to be a yin and a yang. So, for example, you need certain cultural norms to execute certain business strategies. And if you don't have the behavioral norms and you have, let's say you have a behavioral, well, here's an example. Maybe you're an internet startup.
Mhm.
Well, you can't have the same culture as, let's say, Ritz-Carlton. That they need to be a really service-oriented culture that's, and so if you tried to overlay what worked, let's say, at early Microsoft onto Ritz-Carlton, it would go bankrupt. And the reverse is true. If you try to take the tech startup and take that culture and apply it to a Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, then it would fail. And so what you need to have is a vision and a strategy, and then you need to have behavioral values and norms and culture that matches. And one of the biggest mistakes I think leaders make is they think that culture should be just kind of a derivative of who they are as an individual. So they're
Mhm.
them, and then their culture should be a derivative of that, and then they can execute whatever strategy they want. And my position on it is your culture needs to be very intentional
Mhm.
towards the strategy you're trying to execute. And the two, I believe, need to iterate with each other. So you have to take your strategy, and then if you're not hitting the goals or objectives that you want, you have to think, well, it could be the strategy, or maybe it's our execution towards the strategy, which is really a byproduct of our culture. And maybe what I need to do is really think about how to build a culture that can execute. Maybe the strategy is fine. And you don't really know either of these two things, but so you have to what? Fail forward. You have to make a change to the strategy or make a change to the culture and then see what happens. And then if
Mhm.
it's working or not working, you might have to make a different pivot, and you keep pivoting until you finally start blending the two together. And then you get that perfect harmony, where you have this rhythm section of a strategy and this melodic section of the culture, and the two just make a great song. So to me, it's not just one, you need both and they need to be in alignment.
Mm. Like a harmony.
Yes, exactly.
Mm, mm. And Mike, does this differ or change when it comes to, especially startups or, young companies where it's just a business model on paper, just a GTM and maybe an investment? Do you think that the same thing is also applicable for a startup?
I do. I think it's applicable. You could say it this way. So long as there are human beings involved, then I think it's applicable. Because human beings run their emotional and behavioral creatures.
Okay.
We want more. We want so much more than just economic return. Now we need that. Whenever I talk about this stuff, the first resistance is that like, oh no, people are motivated by money. It's like, well, that's obvious. Like, of course, people are motivated by money. They need it to survive. I look at it like Maslow's hierarchy. You have at the base, you have something like food. It's like,
Mm.
you're not that worried about anything unless you have food. And then you need like shelter. But then the third, once you have those two things, this third rank is you need like community, love, affection,
Mm.
friendships. And then at the very top of Maslow's hierarchy is something that they call self-actualization, which
Yeah.
took me a while to understand what that means, but it's becoming a better version of yourself across time. So you're one thing, and then you're going to become slightly better. And this, by the way, is exactly where the spirit of play comes from. You can think about any video game
Mm.
or any game at all. Even playing music, it's all about where your current skill sets are. But then as
Mhm.
you see progress, you work towards progress. That's where the dopamine hits come from. And that's what makes it
Mhm.
fun. In fact, it makes it so fun. Sometimes it becomes addicting. And so if you want to cultivate the spirit of play, and that's where
Mhm.
your people are going to have the best motive, then you need to have people making advancements. So I guess what my point is, the economic engine behind that's the food and the shelter, that's the base.
Mm.
But if you just end there, you're going to create a somewhat miserable group of human beings. So you really need to engage these other layers. You need to build kind of a community, this friendship, a sense of belonging. So that would be a uniting vision that we're trying to build towards, uniting set of shared values. And then at the top, you want to embody the spirit of play, where people can become a better version of themselves in your organization. So I guess if you're a one-man startup, where you're going to build an AI platform on your own, okay, maybe in that scenario, culture is not so important. I mean, it's just you. But even you run on motive, and so you have to stay motivated. And so you might even need to think about culture for yourself. But
Yeah.
the instant you involve other human beings in there, then you need these other uniting principles. You need a vision that people can unite under. You need values with which people can unite under, and that's going to fill the remaining kind of ranks of the Maslow's hierarchy, the self actualization and this sense of belonging and community, and that's what corporations at their best could give to their people. And when they do, that's when they execute the best. So there's a great, like every great sports team, it's like it's more fun to be on than the worst sports franchise. And
Mhm.
it's no different with business. It's like, winning is fun and it's more fun to be on a winning team, it's more fun to work at a successful company. And so people give their best energy towards it. So to me, and here's the grand irony, Sana, sorry for taking so long on this one question, but
Mm.
the grand irony is that a lot of junior leaders think that the best way to motivate people is through economic incentive. And it's not a terrible way to motivate people, but what it does do is it pulls people into a motivational source, which these researchers, Doshi and McGregor, call economic pressure. And that's actually a really exhaustible source of energy. If I'm only working for economics, then it
Mhm.
pulls me from that spirit of play. And then
Yeah.
the grand irony is it makes it more difficult for me to make more money because my ability to earn is a derivative of how motivated I am. So if my motivation source is exhaustible, then my ability to earn is exhaustible. When I get into the spirit of play, I have a lot more energy for my work, and then I produce a lot more. And then as I produce more, the grand irony is I actually make more money over the long time because I get more responsibility. I create more
Mm.
value for customers and for my organization. And so it kind of feeds on itself. So the leader's job is actually at the end of the day to kind of create this environment where people can perform at their best. And if they do that, then the economics will flow from that higher performance. So there's a step in between. People want to make more money. Well, there's a step in between there. You first have to make them more productive, and then to do that, you need to meet some other needs that they have and move them to the more pure sources of motive.
Yeah. I think that's very, very well explained, Mike. And I totally, totally agree with you. And yes, there's definitely this thought or a kind of presumed, thought that, on the economic incentives, they're going to make my team members more productive. But I also think that, as you explained, and of course, with the Maslow's hierarchy, there is people, their systems is, you have that blueprint or the plan on paper, but what exactly is going to make it alive? What exactly is going to give it soul, give its energy? And that is something, it may take time, but it's going to keep you not just surviving, but thriving.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, to me, that's the point of the founder, CEO, visionary role is to come up with a future state that everybody can look at and say, that could be fun to build. There's an irony there too, because a lot of people want to set the quote unquote achievable stretch goal, right? So they lower the vision to what they think is achievable. But in so doing, they don't realize that they're creating a goal that's not inspirational. And in some way, what's really necessary to manifest something interesting is inspiration and motive. But you lower your standard. And when you lower your standard so that you make it more achievable, what you also simultaneously do is lower the excitement level and the engagement level. So, what a leader needs to try to do is come up with a vision that's exciting enough, that's interesting enough, that the right people, the right community can be like, I'm interested in manifesting that vision. I've used this example a bunch of times, so people who follow me may have heard it, but you know, I used to play the game Minecraft with my children when they were, like, younger. They're 18 and 22 now. But the game manifests in there, and there's not a whole lot to do, and then once you make your mission, like, "Hey, let's build a giant tower overlooking the ocean," all of a sudden, it went from you went from being free to everybody having a job. You had to go and, like, collect rocks, and, you had to do all this stuff. You had to conceive of the tower. It's like you created work, but yet that's when the game becomes fun. It changes from boring to fun. So you've manifested yourself work, you've self-directed it you created jobs for everybody, and yet somehow
Mm.
you made the game from boring to fun. And life isn't too much different. If you have an uninspiring and target and nobody's interested in making manifest that target, it's not really fun. People are bored. And when it becomes gamified is when people look at your vision and say, I want to build that. That sounds fun to me. Let's do that together. And then you can create, something with a team and everybody can contribute. You want engagement and people can say, hey, what would be cool is if we did this, and you can be like, yes, that's in alignment with the vision. Or you can be like, well, that doesn't really align with the vision. And you can have conversations about the vision. So
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great example. That's a great example, Mike. And um, do you have any, like, if you can share any, maybe one particular system or ritual that you use at Insight that really embodies this shift from theory to action?
yeah, so it's a really good question. So for us, um, just to take a step back, and I'll definitely answer this, but to take a step back, what makes Insight, what makes any team a team? What makes a group and not just a collection of individuals? And it's some shared and uniting principles that are kind of superordinate, or they sit above everything else. And at Insight, we have four core values. And
Okay.
and those values are what unites us. That it's what we sacrifice towards. We agree to enter the group, the tribe. We agree to constrain ourselves to these principles, to these values. And so for us, it starts with those and it ends with those. So you think about what I mean by that. The initial journey to the group is the interview process. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to interview the human, and we're going to ask them questions like not about how well they know computers or computer science or something like that. We're going to ask them about their childhood and who their heroes were. What did they love about, who's their favorite teacher? Which teachers didn't they like? Why? Why not? And in there, we understand who they are as a human. We can start to see whether or not they align with our values. So, for example, one of our values is progress over comfort. And we have 5 bullets that explain what that means to us. But ultimately, we want learners. We want people who lean into challenges. We want people who take well, they pay attention to their mindsets. They look at challenges as opportunities. And and if we could see the pattern exist in their childhood of origin all the way through now, then we can be like, this person fits. We also have a core value called respect and connect. So it talks about what that means to us. And we can see what things really bothered them. Like if they had a boss and the reason why they didn't get along with the boss is because the boss is disrespectful, that shows us that they value respect.
Yeah.
And that's fine with us. So but we want to understand what bothers them about people, what they love about people. So then we bring people in and then we orient. So I personally meet with every cohort of new employees and we literally go through the values bullet by bullet and talk about why they're there and where they came from. So each of our bullets, we have a library, probably about 30 books where thought leaders spend a lot of time to really discuss what these values mean. And we point people to those libraries. We talk about why those bullets are there, what they mean to us, where they came from, what's the legacy of these ideas. And we do that it's about a 2-hour meeting that I spend with every new hire. And so now you're seeing that we're orienting them across the values. So we hired them because it would allow them to express the best version of themselves here. Then we explain what they mean. And then we recognize daily. So there's an email that comes out on a daily basis from one employee recognizing another employee for the core values. And it's not always manager to employee. It's employee to employee. It's employee to manager. It's manager to employee.
Mhm.
It goes every direction. And we recognize those core values. And every time we do it, somebody gets a ticket. And then we do 2 meetings a quarter, all hands. Every meeting starts with what we call the Wheel of Awesome, where we everybody who's got a recognition event on the core values goes in the wheel, and if they win, they get some kind of insight swag or some kind of prize of the day, a gas card or something like that, just so that we're keeping them top of mind at the beginning. And every meeting we end by having 4 employees tell a story about another employee from the hero perspective about what they did and why it embodied a core value. Because narrative is the most important way of kind of transmitting the idea. This is the value in action. Okay. And we do that twice a month. I'm sorry, twice a quarter. And then it's more than that. It's in our one-on-ones. It's in our, let's say we do a meeting. The first part of our meeting, we do something called good news, and it's basically recognition. So we go through, we start with who's doing stuff well and why, and what are they doing well. It's recognizing our core values operationally on a weekly basis, daily, weekly, beginning. So it isn't something that you get your core values and you throw them up. I mean, you live them. They're part of your operating protocol. They're part of your procedure, and that's how they become life. And more than anything, and this is probably the most important part, is you know I talked about one of our core values being respect and connect. And so you might think,
Yeah.
oh, well, Mike, you must be the most respectful guy. You're the founder of this thing. And it's like, no, I'm just as prone to anybody else to be, I'm actually very impatient. I'm prone to be agitated, but when I show up at Insight, I 100% submit to our culture. And so leaders have to submit to the culture. This is how we behave here. We don't do, we don't tolerate non-conformance to the values. This is what we do here. And so it starts from leadership, and it goes all the way down to the last guy hired. It's like you don't have to work at Insight. There's plenty of other jobs. But if you want to work at Insight, you have to buy into our vision and you have to live by our values. And that's what you might say it's a trade-off. Like you might think, well, it's better just to be however I want. And my response to that is, well, sure, but then you have to work with everybody else who's just acting however they want to, and that can become chaos and a terrible environment.
Yeah.
When you agree to constrain your own behaviors to a set of principles, the benefit you get is you get to work with a bunch of other people who are constrained by the same set. And so long as everybody agrees, you have leaders who are respectful, managers who are respectful, frontline employees who are respectful, and you know what to expect when you show up. And there's something that creates a level of psychological safety at work when you instill those cultural norms.
I think one very, very, I think it's such a brilliant takeaway, especially for leaders from this, Mike, this that personally, I may be a bit of an anxious person, or sometimes I would really, really get frustrated or flustered, with so much to, address to. But when it comes to my team or my company or my startup and the culture in there, I have to submit it. And I think that is something that needs um, clarity, um, emotional, empathy as well. And it also needs surrendering because I think maybe we can leave the best of our emotions, the most extreme of the emotions behind and just blend into the culture because that's exactly how we are setting up the example as a leader. If we are not practicing what we are preaching, then we cannot expect from the employees or the team members to do the same.
Yeah, there's an idea, and I think it's a really bad idea, by the way. And so there's a man who I really respect in life. His name is Vern Harnish. He wrote a book called Rockefeller Habits. He's one of the founders of EO, or Entrepreneur Organization. He has an organization called Gazelle. He's a brilliant guy. Like and I took so much out of Rockefeller Habit 2.0. I mean, it really, when I read it, I was in my 20s, and it completely up leveled my CEO my abilities as a CEO. And there's a really bad idea that I believed from his book that I would love to like debate him on this, but he had this exercise for creating core values that he called the life raft exercise. And the life raft exercise was like to take your best employees, brainstorm their attributes, and then try to like triangulate based on what your best employees' attributes were to use that as a way of coming up with the core values. And I think it's wrong. Like I 100% think that's the wrong way to go about it. The values need to be what's necessary for your mission to manifest. It doesn't matter what your best, like, it doesn't matter what you are as a leader. Like, whatever the core values are that are going to make manifest your vision, then you as a leaders need to submit to it, even if you have to adapt or change or grow. It's not about the values aren't about making it simple for the leader to be the perfect leader and they don't have to adapt. They can just show up and be who they are. That's actually not it at all. The key is, what are the behavioral norms that are going to make for the best environment for us to make manifest our vision? And then leaders start by being the first to submit to the culture. They're the ones to say, look, I'm going to show up here this way and I can model this. And so, to me, that's a big mistake is kind of founders think, oh, well, it's all about me and the values need to just be kind of who I am. It's like, no,
Mm.
maybe you need to change in order for you to make manifest your goals. There's no way that the person who I was at 24 had the appropriate orientation in the world to build what I was trying to build. Like, I had to grow. I needed to read books. I needed to read thought leadership. I needed to change. I needed to get punched in the mouth a few times, so to speak. And so that I could evolve. My stone needed to be polished. And so I needed to adapt. And leaders need to stop thinking of themselves as like this, like, oh yeah, my values need to be some kind of derivative directly of me. And rather they need to be like, what does my strategy need to go win? And and then and then I need to become more like that.
Mm. And it's very interesting, I think. And I mean, you have studied at Columbia and Berkeley, I mean, two of the most respected business schools in the world. Um, I'm really curious, Mike, like how does what you learned there hold up in a boardroom, like where the stakes are real, people are unpredictable, the conditions, the challenges are unpredictable, the data doesn't always tell the truth.
So, business school, like the business school is amazing. It was great. And there's a couple things to maybe break down in that question. So when I was a student, and I want to say it was 2008, I took a leadership class from a woman named Jenny Chapman, who's now the dean at Haas, by the way. And so, I read all the case readers and all that stuff, and I learned a lot. Like it was definitely made me a better leader. But I would say even more important than that was the community of like-minded, growth-oriented, incredibly smart leaders that I was surrounded with, the cohort of individuals who I collaborated with, who not just while my time in school was, but after school where I could talk and bat around specific problems that I was dealing with and get advice and all that kind of stuff. So business school gave me more than just an education. It gave me an ongoing community of people with which to sort out all the complexities of the world, and they gave me a shared vocabulary and experience set with which to discuss those problems because we could both relate to the same course material and so on and so forth. Now, business school is also, it's a lot of material. I mean, you learn
Yeah.
accounting, economics, leadership. You find, there's all marketing. There's a whole like wide variety of things. So it's not just focused on one area. The
Yeah.
and for everything I learned in business school, I also just read literally. I think I counted like one time I tried to figure this out because it was like somebody was asking me, and I was like, well, I had this habit. I would commute about an hour each way, and I just took the habit of putting on audiobooks, and I would listen to a nonfiction, business-oriented or self-development audiobook on the way to work, and I'd listen to a fiction audiobook on the way home. And, so, that was from like 2000 to COVID, 2020. So,
Hmm.
the average book was like 8 hours of material, so it was like almost 1 book a week on the nonfiction side and almost 1 book a week on the fiction side. And just over the decades, the information and the thought leadership starts to culminate to some decent understanding of human behavior and leadership. And so there's a lot of stuff that I learned totally outside of business school as well, just from being curious and wanting to try to be the best leader I could be. And so my advice to anybody who's interested is, if you know what you want to become, like, because it all starts there, like, you have to set a target for yourself. Then all of the material that might help you make manifest your target kinda reveals itself for you. It changes the conversations you have. It changes what you delay on, like, your social, like, if you're watching this podcast, for example, that's for a reason. Like, how did you find it? If you're really back into how you find this podcast, it's like somebody said something, you paused on it, and there's it's like that started from your target. You wanted to be a good business
Mm.
leader, so you found yourself here. And, if you keep that target and you keep focus on it, then you'll just get better over time. And, I another kinda gaming reference, I don't know how well this will fly over, but, I used to play this game Mario Brothers, like, I
Oh
played it as a
my goodness.
kid, and then when my kids grew up, we actually played it on the Wii, with the turtles and you jump around, and we take everything so seriously, like, if we died, we'd be like, "Ah," we'd make all these sounds, and but the game was set up such that no matter how many times you died, you always got another life. And no matter how, and if you lost all your lives, you got to continue. And then you can just use a continue. You might have to beat an old level again or something like that. But the game was never over. And there's as many times as you needed to build the skill set required so that you could solve the level and eventually beat the game. And that's the way business is. If you're persistent enough and you're diligent enough. I mean, you mentioned I went through a bankruptcy. It's like I had to continue, a real life continue. Like there's a reason why the legal system offers a bankruptcy. It's essentially it's the real life version of a Mario continue. And if you're persistent enough and diligent enough and motivated enough, you'll sort the problems out over time, no matter how bad it looks in the moment. And it's just about grit at the end of the day. It's if you want this thing, then you can make it happen.
Yeah, that is so fascinating, Mike. And I think um, I can very well say that, sometimes the best MB, it comes from getting punched in the face by reality. And I think that's not just restricted to B schools or books, or it can be as simple as, from any game. And also, Mike, before we wrap up, it's a bit of a contradiction here. Just I would like to make it nuanced. Like you talk a lot about values driven culture, but here some might would say that values can slow down decision making, or even it can create blind spots. So how do you prevent values from becoming just another, buzzword?
Well, this is another maybe hot take that I have. So another thought leader who was really important to me was a guy named Jim Collins. And if you don't know who Jim Collins is, if your viewers don't know, you need to know who he is. He's one of the most important authors and thinkers and best-selling authors in the field of business. And in the early 2000s, I read his first book co-authored with Jerry Portis called Built to Last.
Yeah.
And Good to Great was one of his most famous books. But in Built to Last, they studied all these companies that had this really long-lasting success, and they found out that each of these companies had different values, and they were surprised by this. It was a research project. They didn't know what they were going to find, and Collins thought there was going to be like, some values that tied the whole thing together, like integrity. Like if they didn't have integrity, they were all going to have it. But what he found was that their value sets were kind of eclectic. That what they shared was that they have this, culture. They had this cult like following where people really believed in the culture. And so Jim Collins made two claims in Built to Last that I think are both wrong. Okay, I want to point out I think they're both wrong. I'm referencing his study to argue with it. The first claim he made was it didn't matter what what your values were. It only mattered what how much your team bought into him. That was the first claim he made that's wrong. And the second claim he made that was wrong is that he said that value should last the lifetime of the leader. And that's also wrong. And I'll explain it in his data set. So the first problem was he didn't realize it, or I don't know why he didn't sort it through and Built to Last. And I would wonder what he would say about it now. But this book is old. It was written in the 90s.
Yeah.
But even in his data set, what he found was his data set showed that culture aligns with strategy. Now, the best example of this is like the Philip Morris was, this big tobacco company made the data set because the data set was objective. It wasn't companies he loved. It was companies who were very successful financially for a duration of time. And Philip Morris had this, they sell tobacco. They basically sell cancer, So it's like, they don't have this like ethical, higher order ethical thing, but they were very successful financially. But what the team believed, the underlying value was they had this kind of hedonistic idea where a short life, well lived was better than a long, pleasureless life. They had this like way of dismissing the fact that they were killing people early. And it was in their value sets. So you could see that their values aligned with their strategy. Like imagine taking that value set and putting it to a hospital. Like the Philip Morris value set would never work at a hospital because it's not aligned with the strategy. Okay, so what he missed was that values have to align with the strategy. Okay, the second thing he said was the values, um, what they have to last the lifetime of a leader. And this is actually I think one of the biggest problems that we have in modern business culture is that people think that once they set their values, they're they have to stick with them. They're the leader for the lifetime. And it's like you need to be able to pivot your
Mm-hmm.
values and your culture over time. You need to be able to fail it forward until you become built to last, so to speak. Like if your value set isn't manifesting your strategy, then you should go to work on it. You should feel free to modify it, make it better, keep reading, keep learning, keep growing, figure out what's missing. Why is your culture creating blind spots? Like you say, hey, your culture might be creating blind spots, but it's because your maybe your values aren't round enough. Maybe they're missing some element that's necessary for execution in your strategy. For example, the progress over comfort value makes sure that we lean into difficult feedback. Like we talk about how to disagree well in progress over
Yeah.
comfort. We talk about how it's better to get it right than to be right in the value set. It's one of the bullets. So you could go on to insight.net if you want to see these values and read the bullets. We talk about how progress over comfort means it's better to get it right than to be right. And that allows us to have debate. And that so our culture makes it such that we don't have a blind spot and it's defined in there. And then we educate people on what it looks like to what we call disagree and commit. So we can have an argument from one perspective. And from my point of view, it doesn't matter whether we align right away. Like if we go my direction, okay, great. The world will tell us if my direction was right. If we go your direction, okay, that's fine too, because the world will tell us if your direction was right. If we take your direction and it doesn't work, then no problem. We can pivot and we could change course. The
Mm-hmm.
challenge is when we can't commit because now I don't agree with you, you don't agree with me, but we go my way. But then you subvert me. And now I don't know whether it's my strategy that's wrong or whether it's the alignment and the efforts towards the strategy that's wrong. We have to solve the cultural problem first of disagreeing and commit before we can ever figure out whether the strategy's working. But if we can fully commit to the strategy and it doesn't work, then we can be like, okay, well, we fully committed to the strategy, even though you didn't agree to it. But now we can see, even with full commitment, it's not working. So we can pivot. We could try your idea. Maybe that won't work either. And we'll have to go back to the brainstorm, but we can fully commit to your idea. So we disagree and commit. And it's about getting it right. So the idea that the values is creating blind spot to me would be a signal that your values aren't thorough enough. They haven't covered all the surface area necessary for your strategy to win. And the way I look at it, values they're an exercise in distillation. So at the top of our values, we have this acronym that's very easy to remember. It's called RSVP. Okay, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean a whole lot, but you can remember it. Then the
Mm-hmm.
next level is R stands for respect and connect. S stands for servant's heart. V stands for value, and P stands for progress over comfort. Those are easy enough to remember, but they still don't mean that much. Then they each have bullet points, which you can read on the website if you're interested. And each of those bullet points have books. So in our value, right? This is a confusing one, but you can go read the bullets online. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's Lean Thinking by James Womack. There's The Toyota Way by Liker. There's like all these. There's literature by Edwards Deming, and it's all baked into these bullets. But if you really want to know where the bullets came from, there's a lot of depth and thought leadership that's underneath that. So you have a library of information distilled into 4 letters. But when you take the value set in total, it's a complete container of all the things that we need to be successful. It's not missing some component. And if it was, we would see that operationally, like, why are we not getting this right? And we would look at strategy, but we would also look back at our core value set and say, what is it about our behavioral norms that are causing us to hit this? And do we need to change them? Do we need to add a bullet? Do we need to add a book? Do we need to modify one of the values in such a way that we round out the behavioral sets that are going to make us win?
Absolutely. I think here time is a huge, it's a variable here, and time to time, humans we sometimes have to pivot. Mike, who was at the age of 24, would not be having the same values right now. You wouldn't be having the same values. So it's always subjected to the change. And I think that's where, this nimble quality, it comes into the picture. That you, time to time, you have to pivot so that, kind of it doesn't become like oblivious. It doesn't go into the dark completely.
I would say if your values are, if you're crushing it as a business, if your employees are engaged and your customers love you and your service is very valued in the marketplace, you should hang on to your core values and your culture.
Mm.
But if your business isn't quite, finding the traction that you want it to find, then both strategy and culture
Mm.
should be up for discussion. It shouldn't just be strategy all the time. We're going to hold our culture fixed. That both of them need to be looked at as like which one of these two things is causing us to miss traction towards our goals. And if it's culture, it needs to be on the table to be modified.
Totally, totally. Wonderful. So, Mike, before we wrap up, if listeners they would like to connect with you, share their thoughts as well, and also check out Insight, what would be the best medium?
Well, Sana, thanks for asking. If your viewers are interested in these ideas, you know, I I'm 50 years old this year. I turned 50, and but I have two kids, 18 and 22. They're both off at college now, and I'm kind of at this what they call halftime. It's like a moment where I built this company with with co-founders and with great leaders, and I'm super proud of it and proud of them and proud to be associated with it. But I really felt called to try to get some of the messages and learning stuff out there, this information. And one of the most incredible things about my career is the number of just ridiculously successful and brilliant people that have made it into my sphere over the years. I'm talking about my business school classmates. I'm talking about the CEOs of my customers. I've been part of this group called YPO, or Young Presidents Organization.
Wow.
I've been part of EO San Francisco. I have business partners and communities. I'm on boards of directors. I'm on CEO advisory councils, and the sheer number of brilliant people who I know, it's insane to me when I finally took stock of it. So I decided to take the same kind of a playbook that you're doing, and I launched a podcast. My podcast is called First Principles, and I'm bringing on some of the people who I respect most in the world, who have done something significant and interesting. And we have an hour and a half, somewhere between an hour and a half conversation about what were the principles that got them there and what were their favorite books. It's like part book club. You learn a little bit about their story. You learn a little bit about the books that matter to them and the ideas that matter to them. And, uh, and we explore topics and we're doing that. And that podcast is going to be released. The first episode is probably going to be released this month or next month. And my YouTube channel is called the Chaput Perspective, and we can pin that in on where you found, but that's my last name, the Chaput Perspective. That's the YouTube channel. If you search there, if they're interested in that and they want to see what this podcast is all about and who some of these guests are, that's where we're going to be releasing it on YouTube. We're going to be releasing it wherever podcasts are, but that's a great place to go, is go to my YouTube channel, subscribe there. There's a handful of shorts so that you can kind of check it out. And I think it's going to be a whole lot of fun for people who are interested in ideas like this, because it's not just me. We're talking to, I think, really incredible people who have done super interesting things, and we're going to try to sort out, these ideas on the channel, and I'm hoping it will be a way of giving back people who want to build great businesses.
Super. Congratulations for that, Mike. And I invite all of my listeners to check out Mike's podcast. I'll have all the details on the show notes for all of your listeners so that you can easily go and check out. And I think this conversation, it is so real, listeners, because strategy, execution, culture, they're not separate chapters. They are one story told through trial, through humility, and iteration. So, Mike, thank you so much for this really, really practical conversation on business, not only built in classrooms or spreadsheets, but I think through hard conversations, second chances, and late nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Sana. Appreciate it. And thanks for the time and attention. Again, if you made it to the end, let me just make one more call. Having started my own podcast, if you like this content, please subscribe. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, share. We need to do a better job, all of us listeners, making sure that the good content in the world gets support from us if we're consuming. You made it to the end of this podcast, you should really like and subscribe to it. There are a lot of bad ideas and bad content out there that goes viral. So if you see good content, I actually think you're obligated to go and share it and like it and engage in it. Write a comment. If you thought it was good, but it could be better, say what you thought could be better. But if you engage with the content, then you'll make sure that the content you like, there's more of it in your life, there's more of it in the world, and that other people get to benefit from it. So please support Sana by liking and subscribing to her cast.
Thank you so much, Mike, for the shout out. And to all the listeners, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the BizBlend. And all I can say, I think maybe the next time your perfect plan falls apart, that's not failure. It is feedback for you. And maybe that's exactly how you bridge theory and reality. So stay tuned, keep listening to BizBlend, and until next time, this is your host Sana signing off. Thank you.